Okay. Do you people realize that it's 8:30 in the morning on a Saturday? Yep, I bet you do. Hey, thank you so much for getting up and coming in. I really feel grateful that we're here together, and my prayer is that 45 minutes from now, you won't be sorry that you got up on a Saturday morning to come in. And I'm really grateful, too, for all the hospitality. It's kind of a stereotype that when you tell people you're going to Hawaii for some reason, people have been say, oh, the people are so friendly. And I think, well, yeah, people are friendly. You know, Texas, people are so friendly. But here I am in Hawaii for the first time in my memory, and after 3 days, I'm thinking, the people are so friendly. And I'm going to go back and tell everybody in Texas, the people are so friendly there, you wouldn't believe this. I also feel grateful to be giving this talk because it's a chance for me to give back some of what I've been taught by people with mental illness. So when I say mental illness is our teacher, what I mean is people who have experienced mental illness are our teachers. And so I am grateful to my patients, people who were gracious enough to let me be their doctor or function in that role, people who are kind enough to talk to me and share their lives with me and struggle with me and disagree and argue with me and teach me. And like everybody in my field, I can say that pretty much everything I have learned about mental health, I have learned from people who are dealing with mental illness. So I'm profoundly grateful to them, and I want to try to summarize and offer back some of what I feel like I've learned from them, not because you don't know, but just in an effort to put into words for each other what we go through and what we learn from it. And how the grace of God shines through the deepest suffering. You know, we have the cross as our central symbol, and we all know it's a symbol of torture and suffering and death. And yet it's also a symbol of how God is able to bring life and light and triumph out of suffering and death. And so that's what I want to talk about today in the form that people have given it to me who are dealing with symptoms of mental illness. So I hope it's also clear from the way I talk about it, and as we talked about last night, I'm not talking about those people. I'm not talking about, some isolated person who's different from all the rest of us, even in the sense of, wow, they know these freaky, weird things that no one else knows. People with symptoms of mental illness are normal people who have symptoms of mental illness. And what they feel like with symptoms of mental illness is just what any normal person would feel like with symptoms of mental illness. And furthermore, to say I'm not talking about those people, I want to say that I'm talking about myself as someone who's experienced episodes of mental illness more than once. So I know what that pain is like, and I know some of what's involved in trying to deal with it. And I've had family members in multiple generations in my family who've had to deal with mental illness. So I know what that's like if you're living with or dealing with or trying to support somebody who has these kinds of symptoms. And then every day of my working life, I have the privilege of sitting with and talking with people who deal with mental illness. And when I talk to people who deal with mental illness, my experience of that is not to look down on people or pity people. Doesn't make me sad or depressed. I look up to the people that I see, the more I hear about the depth of their experiences. To me, it's like listening to someone who's been off to war, somebody who's been in military combat before. And I listen to them with a sense of awe and even reverence for what they've been through and awe that they've somehow survived and lived to tell about it. And if you have experienced some of the depths of these symptoms or some of what maybe people close to you have gone through, you know for a fact that I am not exaggerating with this parallel between war and mental illness. Mental illness is truly life or death. We talked about that last night. And it is intense. People who've been through bad physical and mental pain always say, in my experience, the mental is worse and takes more courage and more strength and more guts to get through. And furthermore, I want to say that combat and mental illness, when it's severe, are also similar in the sense that we lose people. And Kay talked very, very deeply about the experience of a suicide yesterday. And some of you have probably experienced that from someone you know and love. Or some of you may have had suicidal thoughts at times or even attempted suicide. And so you know that this goes with the territory of mental illness. It's not a personal failure. It doesn't mean someone did something wrong. We're never perfect. We never do it exactly right. But you know what? Even if we could do it exactly right, people would still die. And there are people in this world, even to this day, who die of things like high blood pressure that we can't control, even with the best medical techniques, and die of high cholesterol or diabetes, even if we have good treatments for those things, and even if people do exactly what they're supposed to do. So people dealing with mental illness, their families, doctors, treaters, pastors, can all do everything right and people can still die. And that is just unimaginably painful. But at the same time, it's not somebody's fault and it's not somebody's failure. It's part of being a fallen human being in this world that we die of different diseases. So that being said, let me talk about some of the lessons I have in mind. Now, I could go on and on and on about things I've learned, but I want to talk about one specific part of this, of what I call deep life truths or deep life lessons, that I think people who go through episodes of mental illness learn in a more full and clear way sometimes than we do through other means. But I also want to talk about these as life truths that really belong to all of us as human beings, and the ways that people who have been through symptoms of mental illness can teach us about life in general. So what kinds of things am I talking about? Well, lessons like I will never be able to reach all of my potential. Now, this may seem strange, but think about it. If I marry one person and spend my life with one person, I cannot marry all the other people. If I have one career, I can't have all the other careers I thought about having. If I put more of my time and energy into work and my career, guess what? I'm automatically putting less of my time and energy into family or hobbies or arts or other things that I might be doing. We can work stronger, faster, harder, smarter, but you know what? In the end, there's only so much time and energy to go around. Life is limited, and so all of us have things that maybe we wish we'd done, or we wonder, what if I did that? Or even regrets of if only I had done that. No matter what path we take, we're going to have regrets about paths we didn't take or things we didn't do. This reminds me of being a psychiatry trainee. When I was in residency for psychiatry, learning to be a psychiatrist, I met another young man, oh so long ago, when I and he were both young. And his father turned out to be a famous psychiatrist who had written this huge worldwide bestseller. I mean, not quite purpose-driven life territory, but probably literally one notch below that. I mean, 10 million or whatever copies worldwide. People would instantly recognize this decades after the book came out. So I got so excited and I said, wow, tell me about your dad. What was he like? What do you remember about your dad who wrote this amazing book? And he said, his dad was a psychiatrist, and he said, well, let me think. Oh, yeah, what I remember about my dad, I remember the sight of his back as he went up the stairs to write another book. Ouch. If you're spending more time writing books, you may be called to do that, but you may be spending less time with your family, and if you're spending more time with your family, you may be spending less time writing those books. So we're all going to have regrets and unfulfilled potential, especially since we all have our limits, right? This goes with the territory. Work smarter, work harder, work faster. Guess what? We are human beings. We're not God. We are not unlimited in what we can do. This has been a hard lesson for many of us to learn, but people who deal with mental illness know it very, very well. They know what, for the brain, what is obvious to all of us for the rest of the body, right? So somebody has a broken leg. 1 week later, it's splinted. Nobody says after a week of a broken leg, hey, you know, I'm feeling better. What I ought to do? I ought to run a marathon. I need to get this leg in shape. I need to quit feeling sorry for myself and get up and do something for others and go to work. It's obvious, but yet with the brain, it's not so obvious. We can't see the scarring and bruising and injuries of the brain, which take even longer to knit back together than those in the rest of the body because the brain is more complicated. And so part of the art of recovery with any medical problem, but certainly especially with mental illnesses, part of the art of recovery is, yes, I need to try. Yes, I need to get up if I can. Yes, I need to do a little bit more if I can, but at every step of the way, I need to be aware of myself and aware of, okay, when am I getting tired? When are symptoms coming back? When am I starting to get stressed out? Because when those things are happening and I have my warning signs of stress and feeling worse, that's when I know I'm hitting my limit and I need to back off, all right, and rest and go back the same day or the next week or whatever it is so I can gradually do more. But the way I think of it is do it, but don't overdo it. If I try to overdo it, what will happen? I'll be set back. I'll be worse off than I was before. So this can be frustrating because some days with mental illness, the most you can do is survive. It's like you're in a foxhole in combat. And you know this too if you maybe are in a family with someone with severe mental illness. Some days you're just trying to get through the day. And you know what? If you get through the day and you accomplish nothing else, you should pat yourself on the back and say, I was a success today because I survived the day. Just like somebody in a field of combat is going to breathe a huge sigh of relief and feel fantastic that they survived the day. And then maybe the next day or the next week or the next month, it may be you got out of bed today or you took a shower today. But always, always try to do more with a sense of your own limits. Even if we try our best, sometimes we run out of energy. And even more than that, we never really do it perfect. We have limits even if we do it perfect, but we never really do it perfect. We all make mistakes. We all think we have a plan. We all notice how the plan starts to go wrong right when it's too late to stop it from going wrong. Suffering and failure are a part of life. I think of the football season. Dan, my alter ego, the other Dan, was already talking about football. This is a big deal in Texas. So NFL season is starting, 32 teams. Every single team will tell you in total seriousness that their goal, coaches, players, owners, is to win the Super Bowl, right? Their success this year is to win the Super Bowl. So guess what? Well, you don't have to guess. 31 out of 32 teams are absolutely, positively guaranteed to not accomplish their goal this year. They will not consider themselves success. 97% of teams. Do you ever think about this? Every single year. And in college, and you know, go USC or whoever, but go Rice. In college, it's like, 100 teams? And the weird thing is, like in the NFL, the team that feels the worst at the end of the year will be the second best football team in the world. The ones that win the Super Bowl, they say that will eat at you the rest of your life. Isn't that bizarre? But it's built into the nature of life that suffering and failure are part of it. We're all going to make mistakes. And we're all, this is one of those sinking feeling pictures when the doctor sees this. We're all going to make mistakes, and we're all going to fail and have moments where we feel like we've fallen short far more than when we feel like we've triumphed, because that's in the very nature of life. On the brighter side, we all need help, and there is no shame at all in needing help. Now, this is a lesson that's taken me a long time to learn. So when I was 4 years old, I still remember I was playing in my room and I burst into tears. My mother came in and she said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I can't do it." She said, "Can't do what?" I said, "I cannot go to school and start kindergarten." She said, "Why not?" You know what I'm going to say. I don't know how to read and write. I can't go to school. I thought I needed to do it all on my own. 20 years later, fast forward to medical school. For 2 years in medical school, they have you 8 hours or so in the classroom every day. You're memorizing thousands of symptoms and diseases and learning how to diagnose people. And then in the third year, they throw you in the clinics to actually talk to people and try to diagnose them. They say, "Go talk to this person for 15 or 30 minutes and tell us what's wrong." And you know what? I was overwhelmed. Thousands and thousands of symptoms. Did you know to this day computers are terrible at diagnosing people? The computer always tells you you have cancer or some weird, rare, fatal disease. And I had the same problem, and so I was holding back tears at one point, and I dared to ask one of my fellow classmates, to admit that I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. And I said, "How do you do it? How do you diagnose people?" And he thought about it a minute, and he said, "Well, you know what I do? I go in and ask the patient what they've got, and they usually tell me their diagnosis." And I said, well, I was dumbfounded. I didn't say anything. I thought, this is brilliant. This is the best idea I have ever heard in my life. This is like that cheat code that you put into the video game that just makes it easy. We all need help. And so the TV version that I was talking about last night is the doctor comes down, and like Moses coming down from Mount Sinai, the doctor just knows what you have and tells you what you're supposed to do. But that's not the reality, is it? The reality is, as in every other situation in life, we're working together. We cannot do it alone. We can't pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We need each other, and only through a process of all of us contributing do we get anywhere in life. All right, finally, acceptance. You know about this. I'm going to talk more about this as things go along. It's one of the deepest lessons I think we can learn in life. Acceptance basically is due to the fact that there are problems and hurdles and challenges and things that go wrong in life, and some of them we can get over, around, or through. Some of them we cannot. It's not in our power. We're not God. We cannot overcome everything. God can overcome everything, but we are human beings. And so often as human beings, we wake up to find ourselves beating our heads against the wall that's never going to give. And you know what happens when you beat your head against a wall that's not going to give. Don't have to be a brain surgeon to figure that out. We hurt ourselves. We go through pain over and over and over till we realize, oh, this is one of those things that I am not able to change and I need to accept. As the beautiful Serenity Prayer tells us, help me to accept the things I cannot change. Give me the courage to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. Beautiful, beautiful. Out as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. At the end of every 12-step meeting, they hold hands and say this prayer. Really beautiful, really deep. All right, let me sum up where we are before I go on. I won't fulfill all of my potential. I have my limits. I need help. Suffering and failure are part of life. Accepting the things I cannot change. Some of you are thinking, I got up on a Saturday morning for this. I am not inspired. I am not energized. This is not what we hear for motivational talks. What we hear for motivational talks is pretty much the opposite. So we hear you can do it, you can fulfill your potential, you can get past your limits, you can succeed, you can overcome everything. In fact, for this talk, I wanted to Google a quote on limits. I thought, what can I say about living within your limits? So I Googled limits quote. I couldn't find a single quote about the wisdom of living within your limits. Every single quote was, don't accept your limits, don't believe them, go beyond them, overcome them. And so what we normally hear is this right side of the screen of "you can do it." And I'm not saying the right side of the screen is wrong. I think it's true. We've all been put down. We've all been discouraged. We all feel insecure at times, or most of the time probably, and we all need to hear there are things inside you that you know that you can do, that you really can go for. But I really think this is half of a truth, and it's the half of our truth that our culture talks about almost exclusively. And so for people to get up and talk the way Kay Warren did last night about here are my struggles, here are my pains, and they're deep, and guess what? I didn't find all the answers, and guess what? It's not all fixed and taken care of and wrapped up with a bow. This is what I think is a deeper wisdom that mental illness helps to teach us if we're learning. And so I think there's a deeper context for this side of you can do it and you can overcome. And that's part of what I've learned from people who have mental illness. Now, this right side of the screen, this "you can do it, you can do it, you can do it" chant, I call the great American myth. And by it, I don't mean that it's untrue. I think it is a truth about life, you can do it. But I don't think it's the only truth about life, and I think we get into trouble when we take it as the only truth about life. What I mean is the idea or the feeling, usually unspoken, that if we work hard enough and we want it bad enough, we can do anything. Right? This is the American dream. You can grow up to be president. You can be Steve Jobs. You can be Bill Gates. You can be a Super Bowl quarterback. You can discover the cure for cancer. It's very empowering for kids to hear things like this. We don't hear so much "stop beating your heads against the wall" or "stop running into things you can't change." What we hear is, you have a challenge, run over it, run through it, run beyond it. We hear stories in the media constantly about people who've overcome incredible odds to be successful when no one thought they could, right? This is one of my favorites, Kurt Warner, to stay with the football theme here. One year, he was literally stocking shelves in a grocery store. This was his full-time job. And the next year, he was the Super Bowl winning MVP All-Pro quarterback of the St. Louis Rams. Literally 1 year later, an astounding story. And this is the kind of thing that we hear, that we like to see in the media about, you know what, you can do anything if you want it bad enough and you work hard enough. And again, we all need inspiration. We all need a feeling. We all need to be told, yes, there's so much in you. You know things in you that you were meant to do or you have talents to do. And even if other people discourage you, listen, think about it, but sometimes just keep going. And that is a profound truth. But there's also another side to this. If we take this as the whole truth, then it brings up some things that I think are a little bit toxic for most of us. Okay, because if the idea is, well, you can do anything, and this year you're stocking shelves in the grocery store, what happens if a year later you didn't win the Super Bowl? What happens if you're still stocking shelves in the grocery store? What if you haven't gone beyond all your wildest dreams? Does this mean if you're a failure? You haven't become president, you haven't cured cancer, you're not out doing things like this, you're here sitting in a chair where some guy's talking on and on and on? So the downside is if we take this for the whole truth about life, then if you didn't win the Nobel Prize this year, well, what's wrong with you? You didn't do it right. You might feel bad about yourself. You might feel like a failure. And not only is that rather toxic emotionally, it's not true. And I'll say more about this later, but it's not true because, number one, if you've ever thought about it, we don't pick our own talents. All right, so I am not 8'4", not suitable for the NBA. I'm not even 6'4", and I don't have the bone structure and the muscle structure or even the temperament or kind of brain to play in the NFL, and I doubt I could handle very well 300-pound people landing on me and landing on my head. I just don't think I was made for that. Even somebody's musical ability, even their social skills, their charisma, if you're good at math or not, if you're good at music or not, most of these things are given to us. And look, we don't pick our parents and we don't pick our genetics and we don't pick our talents. And furthermore, the obstacles, problems, adversities in life, how many of us have picked those? You know, if you went through abuse as a child, did anybody ask you, check this box if you want abuse or not? When you get up in the morning, do you say, you know, I think I'll dial in about a 6 out of 10 on stress? I think my kid will get a D- in school but not actually fail, and maybe I'll have a fender bender on the way to. We're not asked. We don't get a choice. Things happen to us and we respond the best we can. So the thought that, well, you can just out of whole cloth make up whatever you want and make yourself into whatever you want is actually a partial truth. It's not the whole truth. And there's more to it than that. And that more is something that I feel very indebted to people with mental illness symptoms for teaching me. So I want to tell a story of how I learned this and how, after hearing it many, many times, it finally crystallized in my mind. I was again back in psychiatry training at the Menninger Clinic. So I had graduated as an MD, a doctor, but I was learning to be a psychiatrist. I was not fully trained. Nevertheless, when you're being fully trained, what they basically tell you is go be a doctor and we'll supervise you and help you. So people would come from all over the world, literally, to the Menninger Clinic to be treated for mental illness. And they would come in, and I would go see them, and they would say things like, oh, I'm so glad I'm here. I made it. You know, at home, none of the doctors could help me. None of the therapists could help me. The hospitals couldn't help me. The medicines didn't work. The books I read didn't do it. But now that I've made it to the Menninger Clinic, I know that you're going to help me and know what to do to make me well. Gulp. I was not a fully trained psychiatrist. I had good supervision, but how was I supposed to know how to fix people that nobody else in the world knew how to fix? But I had my secret weapon, my cheat code. I remembered, ask the patient. Best idea ever for a doctor. So I did. For the 3 years of my training here and 3 years of being on staff, for 6 whole years, I asked every single person I ran into that had gotten better in any way, all the way better, partly better, a little bit better, how did you get better, how did you do it, what did you do, what medicine, what therapy, what idea, what book, what did it for you? And you know what? They all used different words and put it in very different ways, and they all said something that reflected one fundamental idea. And I heard it many, many times until it finally sunk in. What they said was some version of this. They said, you know what? I had this illness, I had these problems, I hated it, I didn't want to have it. So I was in denial and I acted like and lived like I didn't have it. I partied too much, I worked too hard, I blew off appointments, I didn't take medications, I just ignored it, and you know what? It got worse and I crashed time after time after time. So finally, after all these bad things happened, I said to myself, look, I hate this, but I have it. And if I don't find a way to accept it and live with it, I'm not even going to survive, much less is life going to be okay. And they told me, pretty much all of them, that this was the turning point, and that after that, things were not easy. Things were not all peaches and cream, but things started to get better from that point onward, that point of acceptance. And so I've learned to call this the paradox of progress. And the reason I say it's a paradox is there's one way to get better. There's one way to get somewhere in life. You know what that way is? You accept yourself as you are right here, right now. All right, Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step taught us this a long time ago. If you're an alcoholic and your life is out of control, you've tried everything to get it in control, and guess what? Nothing works. So what's the one thing you can do if you're an alcoholic and your life is out of control? Step 1, I'm an alcoholic and my life is out of control. Literally, that is the transformative turn. That is the point on which everything rotates. And so today, and I tell myself this and similar things every day, if I want to go somewhere better, if I want to be transformed as a person, emotionally, spiritually, personality-wise, the one thing I need to do right now today is look at myself and say, I love you. I accept you just the way you are without any conditions at every level of who you are. I accept you as you are right now, and even if you never change, I still accept you as you are. And that is, strangely enough, our one way forward, right? How do you deal with being a sinner? You admit you're a sinner. and then somehow the rest follows. Now, thanks to 12-Step and Alcoholics Anonymous and, the wisdom of Scripture and whatnot, we've known this for many years. So if we've known it and it's not really new, well, why doesn't everybody just do it, right? This is the road to getting better no matter really where we are. Well, the reason everybody doesn't do it is that it hurts. It's painful. It's not just an intellectual process. Kay talked a lot about grieving last night, and I really, really appreciate that, because there's grieving for people that we've lost, but there's also grieving for the losses of illness, potential we couldn't fulfill, problems that we've had, problems that children, other people have had. There's an emotional grieving process. So it's not like, oh, doctor, I have bipolar. Well, that clears it all up. Thank you so much. Good to see you. I'm good now. There's an intellectual realization, but there's a deeper process of emotional acceptance that takes months and years. It doesn't take days and weeks. And for most people, it takes years. And that is a process of feeling bad, feeling pain, feeling sadness, feeling confusion, feeling anger, in realizing, look, I've got this and I don't want it. I don't want these problems. I don't want these limitations, but I have them. And when we're in the midst of it, as we've been talking about, it doesn't feel like, oh, this is great, I'm doing my grieving. I'm going to a better place of acceptance and peace. If you've been through it or you're going through it, it feels like chaos. It feels messy and ragged and raw. It feels like I'm not getting anywhere. I need to do something. I need to get somewhere. I need to accept this and move on. But truly, truly, even though it won't feel like it, know that when you are going through that pain and sadness and anger and frustration about your limits and your problems, you are in a grieving process that really is taking you somewhere better. It won't seem like it when you're in the middle of the storm. It looks like the storm will last forever. By the way, bad weather follows me everywhere. I apologize for the tropical storm. I'm going to try to, get out of town before it hits. And this grieving is so, so deep, and it applies to people with mental illness, but it applies to all of us, doesn't it? We have to grieve our limits and losses, and if we don't, we'll just be there beating our heads against the wall forever. And if we do, we emerge with a kind of a depth and a kind of wisdom that we are in a position to teach people and help people both with and without words, whether we're thinking about it or not. We become the kind of people who I believe can bear the image of Jesus and the image of suffering Christ, and see that image of Jesus in the suffering of other people, and be there with other people and tolerate our own and others' suffering, which is the one way that we could ever be helpful to people. So, why do I link this so closely with mental illness? After all, we all get sick, we all suffer, we all have losses. I've just been saying this. We all hit the wall in life. So why, in my mind, does it go so closely with mental illness? Well, the reason is the kind of wisdom I'm talking about usually comes to people when, like me, they start to get more and more and more gray hairs, right? 50s, 60s, 70s. Our bodies don't do as much as they used to. You can't stay up all night studying and do well on the test anymore. Can't stay up all night cleaning up the house for visitors that are coming. Your body gets sick, your memory's not as good, you accomplish a lot of what you're going to accomplish in life, you don't have time to do everything anymore. What's different about mental illness? What's different about mental illness is this is a chronic, serious kind of illness that comes on not later in life like most kinds of illness do, but early in life. The average age that people start to have symptoms of mental illness is age 14. Now, typically, people don't get diagnosed for about 10 years. And even after people get diagnosed, we fight it and go through that grieving process to get to acceptance. So it's a long road. But statistically speaking, and that's what these bars indicate, about 14 is when symptoms start, and you can't always know for a long time what they mean. And then by the time people are in their mid-20s, the majority of people who are going to have mental illness have already experienced it to some degree. So what that means is at a time of life when normally we're young, we're optimistic, we're idealistic, we're energized, we really do feel like more than any other time in life that we can do anything. We can stay up all night and still ace that test. And we can go party all weekend and still overwork during the week and all that other stuff. That's what people are supposed to feel when they're young. There's an energy that propels you to do things and try things, even if you're nervous and scared about trying them. That is normal. People who are dealing with mental illness hit the wall just at that age. Just at the age when they're supposed to be most optimistic and idealistic and feel like their whole life is in front of them and the world is their oyster. And it is incredibly painful. It makes sense that it takes years and years for many people, most people, to go through this process of grief and acceptance. This is not, hey, I lived my life, I didn't do everything, but I got a chance to blah, blah, blah. This is right when I was on the threshold of fulfilling my potential or going for what I wanted, I received notice that, you know what, your life is going to be totally different from what you had every right to expect. And most of the things you wanted and dreamed of and thought you would be able to do, you are not going to be able to do. So the level of pain is profound, the level of grieving is profound. And I'm not saying in all of this, but that, oh boy, isn't it great that people get mental illness because they learn these deep things. I'm not saying it's worth it. I'm saying through suffering, God has a way of working life and working wisdom and working out God's purposes. And we see it in this way with people who suffer from mental illness. And it's very profound because people who have been through this process know something about life. They know that most of who we are and most of the way we judge each other is not our own creation. When I was born, what century I was born in, where I was born, what culture I was born in, who my parents were, who my other family members were, what my talents are, what my genetics are, what my vulnerability to illness is, what my nutrition is, my education, my opportunities, what, depressions or economic booms or wars or tragedies or storms happen. All these things are not under our control. Most of life, strangely enough, is not under our direct control. Oh my goodness, I'm not God. I can't believe it, but it's true. I don't control all this show. Most of who I am is given to me. And so when we think about how we look at people and how we judge people and where life takes us and how we understand or even explain some of the strange places that life takes people, we begin to see, and people with mental illness see this very clearly after a long period of time, that the way we measure a person, the way we look at a person and evaluate a person, generally in our culture is just factually mistaken. The measure of a person is not what we normally think of as successes. It's not what we normally think of in terms of education. It's not what we normally think of in terms of being rich, famous, big in business, big in whatever your career is. Because you know what? We don't control the vast majority of factors that go into those results. The true measure of a person, the one measure of a person is, what do we do that with the hand of cards that God gives us to play in life? All these things that we don't control, how do we respond to them? God gives us crosses to bear. God gives us work to do. God gives us some unique array of talents and abilities. And the only measure of a person is how do I respond to those things? Do I accept what I have been given, even if it's not what I would pick or what I would want? And do I respond to the pains and challenges and disappointments and opportunities of life with humility and grace and grit and courage and nobility? And I want you to know something that I think you already know. When I look, and when any of us look deeply enough at people who are dealing with mental illness or family members close to people with severe mental illness, what we see is not something to pity and not something to look down on. Every day I go to work, I talk about this stuff all day with people who are going through all manner of painful things. And you know what? I don't feel depressed. I feel inspired. I don't look down on people. I look up to people. I see extraordinary nobility, extraordinary grace, extraordinary grit, extraordinary courage under fire. I am inspired every day. So when we think about this movement of sorts that's taking shape to change the way our culture looks at people with mental illness, family members, people who do this work, one thing we need to know is it's actually happening, and these cultural things and ideas are changing. Another thing we need to remember is every day, go back to how we're seeing ourselves and the people around us. It's so easy, it's so inevitable that I'm going to start judging myself according to the usual common sense ways that we sit there and judge ourselves and each other. How beautiful am I or not? What degrees do I have or not? How much money? What kind of car do I drive? How popular am I? How many people like me? How many followers do I have on blah, blah, blah? All of those things are an illusion and a trap. We need to go back every day to seeing ourselves as crackpots, people who are flawed vessels. Like Paul says in 2 Corinthians, we carry this treasure around in jars of clay. We are jars of clay and we have cracks. And the cracks, as someone has said, are what allow the glory of God to shine through. So when we can start seeing that in our vulnerability, in our loss, in our hurting, that is actually where the glory of God shines through, that's where people can identify with us and bond with us and we with them, then our spiritual eyes will be opened on a daily basis, and then we will come to see ourselves and others with the clarity of reality, aside from all these illusions that make us want to judge and put down people because of things that are totally out of their control and not related to what kind of people they are. So, I am profoundly, profoundly grateful to the people who have taught me and learned with me, and to all of you as this process continues. God bless you in your work, whatever work God gives you to do. Thank you for your time.